Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club. I'm Mark Hamrick, a broadcast journalist with the Associated Press and the 104th president of the National Press Club. I'd also like to welcome those of you watching over our video stream through press.org. First, a bit about our ground rules, which pertain to this Newsmakers venue here today, which, as many of you know, is our club-sponsored news conference format. After our guest speaks for about 10 minutes, I'm told, I will begin by taking questions first from journalists. And if there's time after that, I will invite others to ask questions. I will ask you, and this is serious stuff, please identify yourself by name and organization before asking a question. Otherwise, I will interrupt you and ask you to do so. Also, please keep your questions short so we can fit in as many as possible, and we ask no speeches, please. In terms of club business, we have one upcoming event here at the club we'd like to mention. Jim Cantori, the on-camera meteorologist for the Weather Channel, shares his experiences covering the front lines of severe weather over the years. That's an NPC luncheon coming up Wednesday, December 14th. Secondly, I know we're all busy and we're all incredibly important. I'd ask you to please kindly silence your cell phones and other electronic devices. Now to our guest. As some of you know, we've been happy to host virtually all of the major presidential candidates at the club. Most recently, now a former candidate, Herman Cain, was here on October 31st. I'd like to note that between Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, Congressman Ron Paul, and Mr. Cain, all seemed to peak in the polls at the time of their appearances here. So perhaps here by appearing at the Newsmakers venue, Governor, you can break that trend. I'd also like to note that we certainly would have been happy to have had our guest speak as a luncheon speaker today, but it was his campaign's desire to turn this event around quickly in about 48 hours, which our tremendously capable staff and Newsmakers committee leadership has done, for which we're grateful. Our guest speaker today has already compiled a record of public service, having worked for 4 presidents, most of them Republicans, beginning with President Reagan. In 1992, he was named U.S. Ambassador to Singapore. He served as Deputy U.S. Trade Representative under President George H.W. Bush. In 2004, he was elected governor of Utah and won re-election in 2008. Tapped by President Obama to serve in the critically important post as U.S. Ambassador to China, he was confirmed unanimously by the U.S. Senate in 2009. May have been the last time the Senate was unanimous on something, perhaps. He resigned that post earlier this year so he could mount his campaign. We appreciate speakers who can be both eloquent and possess a sense of humor, so it's worth noting that he's recently been on Saturday Night Live, and his daughters who've joined us here today have garnered a fair amount of attention themselves for their parody of the Cain campaign's viral hit video as well. Please give a warm National Press Club welcome to Governor and Ambassador Jon Huntsman.
Mark, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. I'm honored to be here, and I will do no comparing and contrasting in terms of who gets more YouTube hits, my foreign policy speeches or my daughter's YouTube videos. I'm honored and delighted to be with them. Mary Kay is here, our daughter Elizabeth, Abby, and Mary Ann, son-in-law Jeff Livingston as well. The institutions that fill our nation's capital were founded with virtuous intentions to protect our most fundamental ideals: democracy, rule of law, open markets. Today, though, more than ever, these once venerable institutions are viewed by many Americans with disdain and distrust, increasingly tarnished by scandal, corruption, and waste. Our nation is hurting. 15 million unemployed, $15 trillion in debt, the misery index at a 20-year high, the highest poverty rate since the War on Poverty was launched. Yet our challenges go beyond the raw statistics. America suffers from a deficit of dollars and jobs. We also suffer from a deficit of trust. Trust in our institutions of power, from Washington to Wall Street. The American people have lost trust, first and foremost, in the president. A president who, rather than focusing like a laser on fixing our economic core, wasted an entire year jamming through a health care plan the American people didn't ask for and can't afford. A president who brazenly ignored the bold and creative proposals put forth by his own bipartisan deficit commission, Simpson-Bowles, whose failure to deal honestly with our debt caused the first ever downgrade in our nation's credit rating. A president who has employed the same crony politics he once decried, who has used public dollars to pay off campaign contributors like Solyndra, and who has been willing, through his National Labor Relations Board, to sacrifice American jobs to appease union allies. The people have lost trust in Congress and their ability to come together for the common good. Dysfunction evidenced by the supercommittee's recent failure. They've lost trust in our tax code, riddled with carve-outs and payouts for special interests. They've lost trust in our wars, wondering why we are risking blood and treasure, nation building abroad, instead of rebuilding our own nation. They've lost trust in Wall Street and their regulators, whose failures led to a taxpayer bailout that defies the core principles of our capitalist economy: free markets, competition, accountability, and yes, failure. Above all, people have lost trust. Their elected leaders in this city are working for them. Rather than a limited, efficient government that serves the public's interest, Washington has grown bloated and bureaucratic, captured and corrupted by swarms of lobbyists, influence peddlers, and crony capitalists. People see the revolving door between Capitol Hill and K Street, where the overseers and the overseen morph into each other, where the best connected perpetuate their government preferences, whether they be bank bailouts or outdated weapon systems, where former congressmen earn millions of dollars lobbying and consulting for entities they once regulated. The American people have been let down time and again. They have lost confidence in how our nation is run. As a result, anxiety and worry have filled our nation's psyche. We are a country divided and suffering from self-doubt. Yet we cannot let this temporary anguish diminish who we are as a people and who we are as a nation. American exceptionalism is built on our ability to rebound from adversity and overcome any challenge thrown our way. Correcting our course and restoring trust with the American people will take more than rhetoric and slogans. It will take a bold vision and reforms equal to the historic challenges we face. It will take principled leadership. That is what I am offering the American people, and this is what I will do. Number one, I will begin with reform of our 17,000-page tax code. I will eliminate every last loophole, subsidy, deduction, and carve-out. I will use that revenue to lower rates across the board for individuals and businesses. I will create a tax code that is flatter and simpler, one that opens up economic opportunities for all of our citizens, makes us more competitive, and ends corporate welfare and crony capitalism once and for all. Number two, I will deal honestly with our mounting debt by cutting spending in every corner of government, leaving no sacred cow untouched. I will reform entitlement programs based on the Ryan Plan, while holding true to our nation's commitments to those in or near retirement. Number three, I will ensure that no financial entity is too big to fail. I will do this by breaking up the big banks on Wall Street so that never again are taxpayers held hostage by a Sophie's choice. Massive bailouts, or economic calamity. Number 4, I will fulfill a promise presidents have made now for 6 decades and adopt a comprehensive energy strategy that frees us from foreign oil, that eliminates all energy subsidies, and that levels the playing field for competing fuels and technologies. Number 5, all too often, our regulatory framework becomes another tool for special interests, seeking to use the state to protect privileges and insulate themselves from competition. I will systematically streamline regulations in order to create a free, fair, and competitive marketplace. Number 6, I will bring our troops home from Afghanistan while leaving behind an appropriately sized counter-terrorist presence. And I will set our military strategy and budgets based on long-term threats and vulnerabilities, not on spending patterns developed decades ago and reinforced today by armies of lobbyists. Number 7, and finally, in order to ensure that government responds to all its citizens with the same level of urgency and fairness, and to lessen the influence of special interests, I will send Congress a Citizens Legislature Act. I will propose a constitutional amendment imposing term limits on members of Congress, 6 two-year terms in the House, 2 6-year terms in the Senate. I will ban members of Congress and cabinet officers from lobbying for 4 years following their departure. I will seek a lifetime ban on members of Congress and cabinet officers lobbying on any issue where they had significant responsibility. And I will also require them to publicly release all income for 4 years following their service. We must save capitalism from crony capitalism and return to our founders' vision of a limited government that protects free markets and provides a level playing field of opportunity. Turning this vision into reality will require a consistent, principled leader who can unite the American people around these common goals. Someone who has earned trust by delivering upon their promises. I campaigned for governor on a 10-point plan to fix the economy, and I delivered. I signed historic tax reform, including a flat tax. I balanced budgets, cut waste, and tripled our state savings account. As a result, our economy grew at triple the national rate and led the nation in job growth. Hope and change are easily promised, but trust must be earned and built over time. The President came to office with a mandate to restore trust in Washington, yet his inexperience and failure to lead have left us worse off. He promised to change Washington and then succumbed to the partisanship, corporate handouts, bailouts, and spending that have made it so reviled. My opponents offer no better. Governor Romney will say anything to earn the voters' trust. We are in this mess because there are already enough people in Washington who make a career out of telling people what they want to hear. Newt Gingrich is a product of that same Washington, who participated in the excesses of our broken and polarized political system. You may not agree with me on every single issue, but you'll always know exactly where I stand, and I will never waver from my conservative convictions. When I say something, I mean it. And when I promise to do something, I'll do it. In an era of downsizing, we won't downsize our dreams and aspirations. We won't run from our problems. We will meet them head on. But to do that, America needs leadership its people can have full faith in. A leader who, by example, can restore accountability and make our institutions worthy of our people. A leader who knows America's place in the world and all that we inspire Despite our problems, despite the tough choices ahead, we are resilient, we are determined, and we are full of promise. I see a nation that can and must once again be indivisible with liberty and justice for all. I ask for the people's trust. Together, we will build that America. Thank you so very much for having me here today.
Thank you, Governor. We'll begin with questions from journalists, so if you could raise your hand, then I will be happy to call on you. We'll go with the gentleman there in the front. And please identify yourself to begin.
Hi there, my name is Chris Johnson. I'm a news reporter for the Washington Blade here in Washington, D.C.
Thank you.
On Tuesday, the Obama administration made public a sweeping plan to confront anti-gay abuses overseas as Secretary of State Hillary Clinton led the high-profile speech in Geneva on the issue. Rick Perry criticized Obama for the move and said it's an example of the administration being at war with people of faith in this country. Do you believe that advocating for LGBT people is consistent with principles of faith, and would your administration take a similar stance against anti-abuses overseas?
Anti-what overseas?
Anti-gay abuses overseas, human rights abuses overseas.
I believe in fairness. I think that should be a guiding principle of all Americans. I believe in civil unions. I know some might not always agree with that. I believe in equality under the law. I believe that from this country we can lead by example. I believe that we are a shining light that the rest of the world looks to. I found that to be the case living overseas 4 times. And when we do it right in this country, we exude values that the rest of the world seems to watch and emulate. Values of individual dignity, liberty, democracy, human rights, and open markets. I think we ought to focus on getting our own house in order here in terms of how we treat one another, the respect we show for one another, getting our economy back on track and fixing our core. If we can do that, I think the rest of the world will pay us a little more attention.
I just follow up on that really quickly. The Defense of Marriage Act prohibits federal recognition of same-sex marriage, even in states where it's already legalized. And as a matter of states' rights, do you think it should be repealed?
I think the Defense of Marriage Act serves a useful purpose. It allows states to make their own decisions, to make their own way, and the Defense of Marriage Act, I think, is a safeguard then for those states in making a decision. Thank you.
Next question. Yes, sir.
Ed Negrin with ABC News. Governor, under what circumstances would you consider running for president as an independent?
Well, why would I need to consider that when I'm going to win as a Republican?
Would you consider running as an independent based on any finishes in New Hampshire?
I've been a lifelong Republican. We're going to finish strong, and there's no need to consider that given where we're going in New Hampshire, which is straight up.
So does that mean you're ruling out running as an independent?
That means I'm running as a Republican and I have nothing to fear.
Okay. Yes.
Kristen Jensen with Bloomberg News. Could you expand a little bit on, you said that you would ensure that no bank is too big to fail. Could you expand a little bit on how exactly you would do that?
You know, we can fix our taxes, which I want to do. I put forward a pretty aggressive tax reform proposal endorsed by the Wall Street Journal. We can clean up our regulatory environment, which needs to be done in order to infuse confidence into the marketplace. We can take critically important and necessary steps toward greater energy independence. But if we don't deal with banks that are too big to fail, we won't have completed the exercise. Because today we've got, at last count at least, 6 institutions that combined have assets that are equal to 65–66% of our nation's GDP, $9.4 trillion. So I say you can fix everything else, and if you're left with this Damocles over your head, you haven't completed the job. So all I want to do is to complete the job and ensure that taxpayers aren't out on the line with this implied subsidy, this guaranteed bailout in the event that one of these $1, $2, $3 trillion institutions goes south. Because if they go south, we all go south. And so all I want to do is to recognize a point in recent history where banks were right-sized, which is to say, if they screwed up, they could fail. Because I believe that capitalism without failure isn't capitalism. And that's kind of what we built into our banking system. So I say instead of banks that are 66% of our GDP equivalent in terms of the assets they hold, I'd rather that they go down to something closer to 20%, where they were from, say, 1995 to 1998, 99. Goldman Sachs in those days was probably $200 billion as opposed to $1.1 trillion by 2008. And all these banks have picked up assets after the economic implosion, so they're bigger now than ever. So I say I will impose a fee that the banks will pay that will be such that it can mitigate the risk that is today in place by the taxpayers. And as soon as that risk is mitigated, they'll be right-sized. But while they're too big to fail, they'll have to pay a fee. And our goal would be to get the banking system, or any other institution that's too big to fail, right-sized so that if it screws up, it can fail and it won't take everybody else down.
So can I just follow up? How do you go about the right-sizing process? What's the framework for that?
The framework would be out of the White House, out of the Treasury Department. You'd have to come up with an administrative unit that was responsible for managing that fee, a fee that I would not then put into some bailout account, as has been talked about in years past, but would use that fee, whatever revenue went into the fee, to reduce taxes, particularly on the manufacturing side, where I believe this nation is on the cusp of a manufacturing renaissance.
Okay. Next question.
Hi, Carmen Suchansky from Voice of Russia.
Thanks, Carmen.
You put a number of proposals forward, a lot of them kind of controversial, in terms of the deep divides that we have in Congress right now. We blasted Obama for failing to come up with some kind of debt negotiation deal. I was wondering, what would you do differently in terms of implementing your policies when you have a divided Congress? What would you do differently as president in coming to some kind of agreement with let's say, the Democrats in Congress? And if you want to give your answer in Mandarin, I'm fine.
But you're a Russian speaker. Or do you speak Chinese? 啊，你还是也会讲一点中文。好了，我就用英文来回答，因为别人都不会讲。Two things, really. I'd say number one, I would lead. We don't have any executive leadership driving the whole debt and spending debate right now. Number two, I would say you had a perfect opening. A perfect example was Simpson Bowles. I mean, here you had a bipartisan commission with very competent people who put together a debt and spending package, who put forward a tax reform proposal, done on a bipartisan basis. And for the president to have put that out there and said, folks, we're moving forward, we're not looking back, this is where we start, and I want to end with something that looks very similar to it, that would have gotten the machinery going. But he failed. He failed to take even the advice of his bipartisan commission, for heaven's sake. So we're stuck. And in this absence of executive leadership, what do you have? You have mischief making on Capitol Hill. You have people kind of reverting to their partisan positions, finger pointing and engaging in the blame game, going on cable television and whooping it up. And all the while, the work of the people isn't getting done. And that's a huge concern. The people are getting screwed in this country. I mean, let's face the facts. With crony capitalism, with the system the way it's built today, with members of Congress that get to move on right into the lobbying profession to perpetuate the same loopholes and deductions and subsidies year after year after year, we're only getting deeper in the hole. And I say we need a president who's going to identify that, make it a campaign issue, take it out to the people of this country, and make it as significant in our national debate as the economy is. Because let's face it, we do face two deficits in this country. And I think they're equally corrosive in terms of what they do longer term if they're not fixed. One is the economic deficit, and the other is the trust deficit that I think is very real in this country right now. Of people who don't believe in their institutions of power any longer.
Governor,
Can you identify yourself, please?
John Carl, ABC News. For the last 12 hours or so, the Romney campaign has unleashed quite a broadside on Newt Gingrich. I'd like to get your response to two aspects. One is an ad touting Romney's 42 years of marriage and not so subtle implication that Gingrich doesn't quite have the same kind of moral background as Mitt Romney when it comes to his personal life. I'm wondering if you think that's a legitimate issue in this campaign. And secondly, we heard today from John Sununu on a Romney conference call saying that Gingrich is a faux conservative, that all Newt Gingrich cares about is Newt Gingrich. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
I'm so tempted, John, but I'm not going to do that. because I've had some of the same charges from Governor Sanu. Apparently, he forgot to look at my record before he left with those charges before. Yeah, to my mind, it's pretty simple. You can get into the horse race stuff. I'm not into the horse race stuff and the political theater and drama. The people deserve better in this country than the ongoing political drama. Let's stick to the issues that really do matter. All I can tell them is that we have a choice in this race. You know, we have a choice between a panderer-in-chief, a lobbyist-in-chief, or a commander-in-chief. I want to be that commander-in-chief.
And the personal issues and marital infidelity, is that a legitimate issue, or is that something that shouldn't?
Listen, whether I say it's legitimate or not, they make their way into campaigns at all levels. And because of that, they're going to be talked about. So you prepare for it and deal with it.
Last question.
What's that?
Last question.
Okay.
That must mean the flight to New Hampshire is leaving very soon.
Ralph Sanchez from the Daily Telegraph.
Thank you.
Governor, you described yourself a moment ago as a lifelong Republican, and I just wondered what you would say to people watching this primary from overseas, possibly with some alarm over the hawkish tone of the RAB, the apparent rejection of science. Has the Republican Party become too extreme, and is there room for a relatively moderate voice like yours in it?
Welcome to the primary season, which plays out in ways that is traditionally largely unpredictable. And then ultimately we get around to the real issues and reality. I think this is a trajectory or a cycle. Theodore White could have written about it in his day. That is not terribly unusual. But all I want to do personally is to stay focused on the issues. I am who I am. I'm not going to pander. I'm not going to light my hair on fire. I'm not going to sign those silly pledges like everybody else on the stage has signed. I'm not going to go to a Don Trump debate. There are just some things I won't do. But this is politics, and this is the primary season. I do believe the American people deserve better. When I say they're getting screwed, they're getting screwed. And when folks are not focused on the issues that matter most, which is the trust deficit and the economic deficit, as far as I'm concerned, it's a wasted moment and a wasted opportunity, and we've had too many of those so far in the primary season. Thank you all very much for allowing me to be here.
One more moment, Governor. Since you weren't available in terms of your schedule to receive this at a luncheon, we want to thank you for being here today, and please accept our very token of our appreciation, the National Press Club travel mug, since you're doing a lot of traveling. Thank you.
Thank you all very
Appreciate that
much.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the,
Feel free to
thanks
come
for
back
the
to the
venue and the
club.
hospitality. We will do that. Thank you.
Nice to see your family.
Try to be bright and news conference. It didn't work this time, apparently.